Hello, welcome to Latter-day Saint Home Educators Wednesday webinar series. LDSHE is an all-volunteer 501c3 nonprofit with a mission to support, strengthen, and inspire Latter-day Saint families in home education. We've been putting on conferences that gather hundreds of LDS homeschoolers from across the country since 2004. Today's presentation is one of many classes originally prepared to be presented live at the 2020 LDSHE Homeschool Conference. Our physical conference has been canceled due to coronavirus concerns, so we are embracing our theme, Trust the Journey, and moving forward with this online conference. We hope you'll find motivation, inspiration, and encouragement in today's presentation. A few housekeeping items before we begin. At the end of the webinar, our speaker will answer questions. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please type it in the chat box where it will be recorded by the facilitator and passed on to the presenter during the question and answer at the end of the presentation. Replays of these webinars will be available on the Latter-day Saint Home Educators Facebook page. They'll also be on our YouTube channel and website, ldshe.org, by the Friday after this live webinar airs. These webinars will be happening every Wednesday until May 20th at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern. Again, we welcome you to the LDSHE Wednesday webinar series. Thanks for being here. We will turn the time over now to Amy Palmer and her class on homeschooling after public school.
Okay, I'm going to assume that means I'm ready to go. So welcome to Homeschooling After Public School. I'm Amy Palmer, and I am thrilled to be able to share some of, hopefully, my help experiences and tips that will be helpful for you engaging in this awesome new adventure of homeschooling. Just to make sure that we're on the same page today, my goal is to share with you some of my experiences so that you can maybe get a feel for the benefits and trials that you'll face. It's going to be geared that way more than here's a list of things for you to do. So sit back and relax and enjoy all of my mistakes that I made. So every family's homeschool is different as families are themselves. Some do some things well, some do other things well. And that just means we all have to be diligent and follow the Spirit so that our homeschool can become what the Lord would have it be and what it needs to be for our families. So a little bit about where I'm coming from. We started homeschooling in the fall of 2014. That's us about the time we started. And man, looking at this picture, all of that fear and just excitement, huge excitement, comes rushing back. We started when my kids had completed their 2nd, 5th, 7th, and 9th grade years of school. And we've been homeschooling now for 6 years. So we've grown up a little bit. And I have 2 kids in college now, and next year I'll graduate my 3rd. So I'll have to learn how to homeschool just one child. And that's going to be an interesting journey as well. So everybody comes to homeschooling from different angles, different reasons. I started looking at homeschool when my youngest was in 2nd grade. She would come home from school in tears, and it obviously made me sad, and I didn't know what to do for her. She was having trouble because she is a huge rule follower, and she wanted other people to be following the rules too. You know, she would sit at her table and she would try to encourage everybody at the table to follow the rules so that they could get whatever thing that the teacher was dangling in front of them. And it turned out that the kids thought she was a little bit nuts, and why would you want to follow the rules? And so they made fun of her, and she would cry, and then they'd make fun of her for crying. And so it led to some really hard afternoons when she would come home from school. This desire to follow the rules and have others do so is something that she's definitely had to work through, even with homeschooling. It's not something that just went away, and it's something that our family works with in various parts of our lives, even today. I'm just grateful that she's able to work through it with her family and people who love her, instead of having it in her face all the time at school. This has been a much better environment for her. When I would go into her classroom, I was appalled at the disrespect that the kids had for their teacher. And I know that some teachers handle this better than others and can engage a classroom in a much more positive way, but her particular class that year was really disrespectful, and it was just a really bad situation. And I was tired of it. I didn't want my kids growing up thinking it was okay to disrespect people like that. And so I started looking at homeschooling. My husband had wanted to homeschool from the beginning. So he was super supportive right from the beginning, which I'm super, super grateful for. I'm lucky enough to live in an area that is close to all these wonderful moms who plan this conference, which I didn't even know I was so lucky until I started looking into homeschooling. But that meant I was invited to my first LDSHE conference right off the bat. So I went, my kids went to school, my husband stayed home with the kids, and I got to go to this beautiful conference all by myself. It was kind of fun. But while I was there, and I am so sad that everybody who hasn't been there doesn't get to experience it this year, because it is a very powerful experience. The families that are there are so family-centered, gospel-centered, and it's a powerful experience. I met loads of people that I wanted to emulate, and as I watched the families interact, I was overwhelmed, and I knew that that's what I wanted for my family. And as I went to the classes, different kids would pop into my head at different times, and I knew that it wasn't just my daughter who needed it, it was all of them. And so we decided to bring everybody home, and we did have to make it a matter of family prayer and fasting, because I obviously had older kids, but everybody got on board, and we started this journey. My freshman, my oldest son at the time, he was probably the most supportive of what was going on. As we talked throughout our first little bit of the school year, I found out things that had been going on at school that I hadn't even known about, and was so grateful that he was at home and that he was having an opportunity to heal. He was going to speak to the youth this year at the conference, and he wrote up his bio, and in his bio, he said that taking him out of school was one of the best things that we ever did for him. And so I'm grateful that the journey and the hard work and the fears and the roadblocks that we have faced have turned out in such a beautiful way for our family. Bringing my kids home, because I had a 10th grader and an 8th grader that first year, I knew it was going to be for the long term, because I was going to have kids in high school for the rest of our homeschooling journey. And I didn't want them in and out of high school, and I had the understanding that it was hard to take them in and out. So I knew that I was looking at the long haul when I jumped in, and I know that that's not the case for everybody. Some people are in one year and out another year, but for us, we dove in, and we were in for the long haul right from the beginning. And I am so grateful that we have made the choice to bring our kids back home and get everybody close for these last 10 years that they're home. And I can't even believe how fast these years are passing. Okay, so digging into some of the meat. It was terrifying. Obviously, I had a pretty good impetus, so I was pretty excited to be shedding some of the public school stuff that we were dealing with. But there were a lot of things that I was scared of. So let me share with you some of my biggest fears. They're fears that I can still get overwhelmed with if I'm not careful and I don't stay focused. So the first thing is that homeschooling is unscripted. In public school, especially because we'd already started high school, I was used to the counselors, and okay, your kids do these things and your kids take these classes and then they'll get in college, and if they get this score they can get into this college, and if they get this score they can get into that college. And it's a nice tight path that is well tread. There are a lot of people there, and it's comfortable because there's not a lot of places you can go. It's pretty well scripted where you need to go, and there's a lot of focus on certain aspects when you're in public school. That was comforting for me. Leaving that and going out into this unknown territory, that was pretty scary for me. I started hearing rumors of all these different paths that kids could take, and maybe not even go to college. There are lots of ways that kids can become responsible adults and support a family. And anyway, so many opportunities that opened up. And it turned out that that was one of the biggest blessings. Homeschooling allowed our family to be creative with what we did with our relationships, with what we did with our education, with how we problem solved. It gave us space to approach these things in a way that we didn't have when we were in the public school system. And it was a huge, huge blessing. Like I said, my kids had space to heal and to become what they wanted to become, and make friendships that they were comfortable with, and without the pressure of the public school and the other kids, and I'll get into that too. But anyway, one of the other things that I loved about the creativity in the space was that I got to fill some of that by creating classes and learning how my kids learning with them. Here we're dissecting a pig, which is not something that I had ever done, much less did I ever think I would do with my kids. And yet here we are. And it's so fun to look at the wide expanse of what's out there and find cool things and get excited about a subject and share that with your kids and learn together. That was one of my favorite things. Okay, so another fear, obviously, it's homeschool. Socialization is probably the biggest thing. If you talk to anybody about homeschool, what's going to happen with socialization? Well, it definitely changes. But socialization is going to be as different from one homeschool family to the next as it is with one public school family to the next. For us, I felt like the socialization, the homeschooling socialization that we found ourselves in offered a lot of freedom for my kids. One of my favorite stories about this is that my 17-year-old, he was 17 at the time in this picture, he was learning with some friends about programming. So we participated with our learning with our friends here, and then on another day we spent a lot of time in a car with another family and friends going to a different co-op. One of the kids that we would often travel with was 10 years old, and he and my son, who was 17, would spend the whole 20 to 30 minute car ride talking about programming. My 17-year-old son often brought questions for the 10-year-old. How do I do this? And what does this do? And what are you working on? And there was no bitterness or malice or any sign of my older son, my 17-year-old Tim, trying to be better than this 10-year-old. He was perfectly fine being on the same level with him and learning and doing programming with him. So that was a really neat thing for me to see. And it was, and that those types of relationships, my kids with the adults that we co-op with, they have developed some beautiful relationships with those adults that have given them confidence in so many areas. Oftentimes it's my daughter, my youngest daughter, who's now 14, when she is working on fundraisers for church, and they have to go up to a door and talk to people, strangers who are usually older than they are. She's usually the one that's chosen to talk because she's comfortable with it, and they all know that she is, and she feels good that she is comfortable with that and has the confidence for it. So the socialization it's definitely different than in public school, but the freedom to not have to be in a certain class or with certain people of a certain age has been a tremendous blessing for my family. So the next fear, I was actually concerned that we were going to be together too much, that all the time together was going to lead to more fighting, and more bumping of heads, and how was I going to deal with that? The funny thing is that we actually ended up being together more often than I thought we would. Extracurriculars turned into family events. If one kid was doing orchestra, we found an orchestra where we could all go, and they could all rehearse at the same time, and their concerts would happen at the same time. We found a soccer group where we could go and all of us practice at the soccer field at the same time, and games were held at the same time for everybody on their varying levels. It was really a neat thing, but it led to us being together really 24/7, especially until my son got his license. And that was a scary prospect for me, but it really turned out great. The hardships that my kids faced in classes together built friendships and common ground that they look back on. One of the fun things that I absolutely didn't expect was that, especially my older two, when I pulled them out of school, they were on track to be in very different friend groups at school. And they enjoyed each other, but they really wanted and were headed to their own space in school. Homeschooling is obviously a smaller community. And they were able to make friends that they shared, and they would go together on the weekends to gatherings or events or whatever. Sometimes it was my three oldest, and they would all go together and hang out with friends and other families. And so really, I was amazed at how much time we did end up spending together. But if there is one thing that I would point to as a success for our homeschooling adventure, it's the sibling friendships and relationships that were built. If that was all we took away from this, it would be a success for our family. So I'm really grateful for that. Another fear is, will I be able to teach them everything that they need? This is pretty daunting, considering the faith and trust that we have in teachers who do this full time. And you're going to be doing it on how many levels, or how many kids, and continue to do all the things that you do in your normal daily lives. And so this can be really daunting. I was pleasantly surprised at my ability. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was surprised at my ability to take all of it on. And the fun that I had with the kids in learning, in preparing classes for them. And my kids, they started seeing me as somebody who was striving to learn. And they watched the effort that I put into learning. And so they knew that learning was going to take effort. If they wanted knowledge, if they wanted to do something new, it was going to take effort and time. And they were grateful for my efforts, and they got to see that, yeah, that's how it works. And so they were prepared to do it for themselves. One of my favorite things, and I would have shied away from being a teacher in, like, as far as away from that as I could have gotten in college. And yet in homeschooling, I have so loved creating classes and putting together classes for my kids and their friends. This is an example of a writing class that we did, and it actually writing was the one thing that before we started, I would have pointed to and said, I cannot do that. And I ended up teaching a class, and it was so successful that we all, the parents of the other kids, we all wanted to do it again a second year. And then I've been doing it again for younger siblings. So it's been really successful, and it's built my confidence, which has been fun. And I think is good for my kids to see happen for me too. Who would have guessed that I would have loved putting together classes and just getting kids excited about various topics? It really has been a joy. So you are definitely more capable than you think. And they're amazing people to help you. This year, as much as I love putting together classes, I bit off more than I could chew. I decided that I was going to teach music theory. What I didn't anticipate, what was a new thing for me this year, was teaching a class to kids who were beyond me and what I was trying to teach, which is obviously not an ideal situation. And most of the kids were well beyond me in music theory, which I didn't anticipate. I probably should have, but didn't anticipate. And so I had to switch my role. And I became a person who they had to be accountable to more than a teacher, because the time that it would have taken for me to learn, to catch up to them, and then prepare new material for them just wasn't in the cards for me. But what I was also able to do was pull in help. I found a beautiful woman who has been teaching my kids piano, and she was more than willing to come and help teach. And she had majored in music theory in music in college 50 years ago, and she was so excited to dust the cobwebs off of it and share it and have fun with these kids who are great kids. So it was help that I wasn't anticipating would be so readily available. And the Lord provides in beautiful ways for us to be able to take care of what we need to for our kids. All right, and the last one that scared me. What will people think? There is definitely a stereotype to homeschooling. And I would hear, really? You want your kids to be those kids? And, excuse me. And I faced opposition that I had no idea. My mom and my sisters have been some of the biggest, loudest voices of, what do you think you're doing? And if I hadn't known this is what Heavenly Father wanted us to do, it would have been really hard. So the only thing that I can say there is learn to rely on the Lord. I'm grateful that I've been able to strengthen my relationship with the Lord through homeschooling, through where I've needed Him and all of the bumps along the road. In a recent general conference, Elder Wilson talked about a scripture in the Doctrine and Covenants, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact reference, about slothful servants. He taught that the reason that the saints were being admonished against being slothful servants was not because they were relying on the prophet for revelation. Oh, excuse me. They were relying too much on the prophet for revelation, and they weren't seeking their own. He subsequently admonished us that we need to be diligent in seeking our own revelation in our lives, and homeschool it definitely screams for that more than a lot of areas in my life. So I'm grateful for this. So far, a pretty rosy picture I think I painted. All these fears, they just evaporate and become these beautiful blessings in your life, which to some degree that I feel that has happened, but it's taken a lot of hard work. And that's where we get most of our rewards, right, is through hard work. And homeschool definitely requires that. Oddly, these fears really weren't the biggest things that I faced. But there were other roadblocks that I didn't expect. And so I'm going to talk about those for just a minute. When I came home from that first conference, I was so excited, like beaming so excited that we were going to do this. And over at the homeschool conference, I heard homeschool is not school at home. They're different beasts. And as naive as I was, I at first thought that was just, oh, because it's different curriculum and I'm in charge and because we're doing it in our pajamas and we get to sleep in. But there was more to the transition, definitely, than just those things. So here we go. I wasn't part of my children's educational lives anymore. My oldest son had gone through 10 years of public school. I helped him occasionally with projects. More it was facilitating projects and homework than it was helping him. And my oldest son and my oldest daughter, especially, they looked to their teachers. They trusted their teachers. They hadn't learned to trust me for that relationship. And so fitting myself back into their lives in the role of teacher was a lot of transition, and it took a lot of patience for both of us, for all of us. There was trust that had to be built on both sides of the coin, and we really had to learn a new aspect of our relationship of teacher and student, which sadly had left our relationship and wasn't really prevalent in my mother-child relationships that I had at the time. So deschooling is something that could have softened the blow, and we're going to talk about that. But I really wish that that is something that we have done in our schooling. Another related roadblock was that I wasn't familiar with the curriculum that the kids had used at school. I didn't know what they covered and what they hadn't. I didn't know where their holes were. And I thought third grade was third grade was third grade. And it was very, very wrong. To get started, I used The Well-Trained Mind by Susan Wise-Bauer, which is a tremendous resource, and I used it as my curriculum Bible for a while. Starting out, if anybody chooses to use that, just be warned that no human being can do everything that she says, that she lays out in her plan. Do not hold yourself to that standard, because I'm not sure anybody could do that. So I had my beautiful curriculum picked out and was getting ready to get started. And day one, I think it took us all of 5 minutes before we had tears. My son, who at the time was in 6th grade, I was starting grammar with him, and he didn't know what a verb phrase was or a predicate. And so we had to go back and we had to cover some stuff, and it took a lot of work to fill in the gaps, because I was really determined that grammar was something that was important and that we were going to do. So not being familiar exactly with where your kids are, helping them with their stuff going into class, it just wasn't enough for me to know really where they were. So also related, how do they learn best, and what are their educational strengths and weaknesses? I just wasn't familiar enough with this aspect of my kids' lives. So putting these things all together, a lot of the curriculum we started with, it really didn't even last the week. I have a lot of curriculum from that first year that I didn't end up using and looks pristine and new. This tends to happen for me about every year. Every year I think I come up with something that I think is going to be super fun, that the kids don't think is as fun, and we don't end up using. And it's part of the journey. Where is that perfect curriculum? This is something that I've learned that doesn't exist really, because when we're looking for perfect curriculum, we're looking to get back on that nice tight road that's laid out for us, that scripted road that public school offers. And like I said, homeschooling is different, and it's ended up that we've picked and taken from different areas, and I had to be comfortable with my goal for my kids and not try to adopt goals and steps from curriculum. I use all of this stuff to create what we do, but I don't think there's any curriculum that I've picked up and we followed step by step by step and gotten this beautiful package at the end. It just doesn't work that way, because we want to own. That's why we're homeschooling. We want to own our kids' education. And so there isn't a perfect curriculum except for the one that we create with the resources that are available. Okay, so going back to deschooling. Like I said, this isn't something that I did. It's something that I desperately wish I had done. So I'm taking a lot of my notes and ideas from Jeannie Faulkner and the homeschoolmom.com. Jeannie is a tremendous resource. She has talked at the LDSHE conference in the past, so she has stuff that's on the audio library. You can find her stuff there, and I highly recommend going and listening to it. Check her out on the Homeschool Mom. She works, I believe, with Julie Bogart with the Homeschool Alliance and is a resource there as well. So anyway, she's a great resource, and I'll show you why here as I give you some of her notes. So what is deschooling? It's an adjustment period, and it's relationship building. Coming home, it's just different. I'm not sure exactly what it is about it, but it is just different. And kids need time to adjust and kind of shed this school thing. And parents need time to learn to trust themselves. And this relationship that I talked about this parent or the student-teacher relationship, it needs time to build and grow. And so we take time when we're not putting that school pressure on things to build these relationships. So Jeannie calls it a time to decompress and disconnect from school being the default and school ways being the expectation. Excuse me. What are you going to do during deschooling? You can read and watch documentaries, go to museums, visit parks, go to historical sites, get outside and get moving, create things, reconnect with relatives and friends, meet your librarians, network, and find new friends. I realize that all of these things are not available right now. Luckily, the internet is a great place to start. There are lots of virtual field trips on the internet. As much as I hate to admit it, YouTube has some fantastic stuff, and you can just kind of let loose and let your kids decide what they want to watch and follow them through it. We have found some super neat science channels that have inspired my kids, and use YouTube as a jumping off place and follow the rabbit hole and see what all you can learn about these topics that you didn't even know your kids maybe were excited about. There are a lot of ways to spark interest for your kids, and even just getting outside is a huge thing. Often children need time to rediscover their interests, their natural rhythm of learning, and their sense of curiosity and what drives them to engage. And this is what deschooling can help us do. It helps us relearn about our kids. It helps us learn about our kids' strengths and weaknesses, when they function best during the day, what are the natural areas of interest, and where and when should learning take place in what environment. Sadly, these are things that I didn't know. And if we had taken a time to step back and just and given myself time to observe my kids in a different way with a different focus, I could have learned these things, and it would have helped soften a lot of those road bumps that we faced. So it's easy to recognize some of the transitions that we are going to make as parents. When are we going to do our ministering? When are we going to exercise? How are we going to fit in food preparation to all of our new responsibilities that we're taking on. When am I going to get together with my friends? Sometimes it's easy to not recognize that kids are going through transitions too, and maybe some that we wouldn't anticipate. They don't know maybe what to do because they're used to their days being planned out by their teachers. Maybe they're nervous about attending homeschool events because all of those kids are there. All of the homeschool kids, that they have this stigma in their head. I know that this was something my daughter had to get over. And it was just something we had to work through. And she had to learn that she could make friends there too. And really, the kids were pretty cool. They might not want to do things that remind them of school. And at the same time, they don't want to do things in a new way because that's not the way we did it at school. I mentioned some of the healing that my kids needed to do, and I really wish that I'd given them the opportunity to connect with me on that level without having the school stresses on top of that. And then I've mentioned reconnecting with personal interests for the kids. Okay, as I looked through this list, you can kind of look at it again and see that a lot of this type of thing would have been mitigated to some degree if we'd taken the time to deschool. And now I'll explain how that was. It happened anyway. It happened anyway, and I tried to fight it because I was so concerned about getting my kids ready for college and thinking that we didn't have time for it. And if I just embraced it, things could have gone more smoothly. So let me make sure. Okay. And then the biggest road bump that I hit that I wanted to share was my kids did not respond to homeschooling the way I thought that they would. I thought that I knew how they would, I thought I knew their strengths and weaknesses going into it. And for sure, my daughter Sarah was going to be my most motivated kid. She got all the praise from the teacher. I never had to bug her about her homework, and she always got really, really good grades. Well, she wasn't. She became my least motivated child, and I just didn't know what to do with that. Yeah, expecting her to be my easiest, I threw my hands up. A couple of things that were going on. She was upset with me for bringing her home. She was really starting to hit her groove in school socially. She felt like she had a really good place in the social system at middle school, and she did not want to leave those friends behind. And that confidence and that place that gave her meaning. And so she was upset with me. I learned that she didn't do school because she wanted to do school. She was doing it for the accolades of the teachers, for the grades. And so when I brought her home and I wasn't giving her grades and my praise just wasn't the same as the teachers, she started to procrastinate and just refused to do the work. And so the first year, really, she didn't do that much school. And had we just taken the year off, we probably would have been in a better place because we would have explored where she wanted to explore, and our relationship would have been better at that point. But this was, we did a lot of butting heads that first year because she did not respond to homeschooling the way I anticipated. So it's been neat to watch her develop. And watch her shed that need for the praise of the teachers and learn to be self-motivated and want to do it for herself. Her senior year versus her 8th grade year were very, very different things. And I realized she did a lot of growing in a lot of ways during that time, but homeschooling gave her the opportunity to have experiences to grow that she couldn't have had in public school and were things that I didn't even know she needed. So it was a blessing to have her come home. So your kids may not respond the way you think they're going to. Just keep that in mind. So I know that as I've presented a lot of our personal experiences, and talking to people who have come out of public school and have started homeschooling their kids, I've heard a lot of these types of themes. And so I know that you're going to be able to face them with total ability, for lack of a better word right now. And you're gonna be able to find blessings for your family that you didn't know were there either. I mentioned Julie Bogart briefly. She is one of my favorite mentors. She came to the conference a couple years back. I have used a lot of her curriculum. I love it. And I love listening to her podcast. She really keeps me grounded. In one of her podcasts, she mentions us schooling, which I love because it focuses on how different each family's school is. And you have to create it for your family. Focus on the things that make your family you, and don't lose sight of those. It was very easy when I was starting out to look to other sources. You have to, because you've never done this before and you're learning, so you have to look for these other sources. But every time that I have looked and seen something beautiful that works for somebody else, their perfection, and tried to implement it in our family just exactly that way, I have just met with frustration. I have to keep remembering that we are Palmers and we do things the Palmer way. And so I take ideas from different places, and there are so many. The audio library, the LDSHE audio library, has just a ton of ideas and is a great place to get you started for ideas. But never lose sight of who you are as a family and why are you pulling your kids out of school. Write it down and don't forget this important detail, because it will fuel so much of what you do. If you're taking your kids out of school for just a few months, don't let or coronavirus, don't let it just fly by. What do you want to give your kids in this time? Have some sort of focus, and it will give so much more meaning to the time that you have with your kids. So find all the ideas, look them all up, do all the research, but make sure that what you do nourishes you, especially nourishes your children, and nourishes the relationships that you have. Those are the biggest blessings of homeschooling. I saw an interview with Tim Tebow, and he was talking about his homeschooling experience. He said that, his parents wanted he and his siblings to have a good education, but the main motivation for taking them out of school and homeschooling them was wanting their children to have a rich childhood and strong family relationships. If these things were crucial for me as well. And I have noticed that schedules and curriculum and methods, they can be so helpful, but they can also derail me. If I shift my focus and I'm focusing on all of those things instead of why did I bring my kids out of school? And what is it that I ultimately, above all else, want them to get out of it? And how do I want them to succeed? And oddly enough, I'm sorry, pop-ups. Okay, we need to be open to change. Our kids are changing daily, so our school's going to look different every year. Be open to that change and embrace it, because it gives a lot of spice to the whole journey. Julie Bogart also said that homeschooling is a journey, it's not a destination. So just sit back and enjoy it. Some of the things that we do that make our Palmer School, our read alouds as a family and sometimes one-on-one. My daughter has spent loads of time cuddling with the dog and a book, and it sure helped her reading improve. It was a crazy thing, but it was a beautiful thing for her. We do hot chocolate every day almost. My kids love to sip on it, winter, summer, spring, whatever, while they do their work. Lunch with science videos and my son have opened up some wonderful conversations and learning that is totally a tangent to anything else he's doing, but has been so, so fun. Giving my kids the chance to co-teach our co-op classes, wow. It's something that they love to do. They've seen their older siblings do it, and they're super excited about it. And what a confidence builder, and what wonderful things they've been able to learn. School in our pajamas till at least lunchtime. Absolutely. Days that we go and spend the whole day at the library, learning about whatever we want. Just go and pull off whatever books look fun, and lunch at Potbelly's. I don't know where it came from, but it's been part of our tradition. CNN 10 morning news while we make breakfast. Memorizing various poems in the Living Christ together, and hiking are all things that we have made part of our family culture and our school culture. There are things that I choose to pass by. I've tried some of these and I just have not been able to succeed in all of them. And so I don't let it get me down. I focus on the things we're doing well. Morning devotionals, kind of iffy around here. Regular awesome field trips, usually I'm a tag along. Planning them and making them happen has not been something that has been part of our journey. Rabbit holes, I wish I could be freer and just follow my kids where they go. But I think that part of that is younger kids and trusting my kids and trusting me. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. Celebrating holidays and birthdays in extravagant ways. That's just not part of our deal. Service projects, learning parties, fun things, and they sound so cool and they get me really inspired, but trying to implement them in our school has never been a great thing. So there are things that I'm just leaving by the wayside. So Elder Holland expressed this idea a little bit differently. He said, you can have what you want, or you can have something better. Through all of the fears, through all of the roadblocks, as we put our trust in the Lord and we trust our kids and we trust ourselves, the journey is beautiful. And we can create our own us school, and that is something better that we can even envision in our lives. So I'm grateful I've had the chance to share these with you, and I'm open for questions now.
Thanks, Amy. So if anybody has any questions, you can post them in the chat box or the question and answer box, and she will happily answer them.
Hopefully that was helpful.
I thought that was fabulous, Amy. Even though I've been homeschooling for like 8 years now, it took me right back to when I first started out. A lot of those same fears and concerns, and
Yep.
I think we all go through those. All right. Well, I don't see any questions, so we're going to go. Oh, we do have one. All right. So Jessica says, thank you. She asks, do you make a detailed plan every year?
This is one thing. When I talk about deschooling, parents have to go through this to some degree too. And I do it a little bit every year. I do make a fairly detailed plan at the beginning of the year, where I want to go and what books we want to use. As far as like discussing those books and stuff, that's stuff that comes along with the year, but I know basically where we want to go at the beginning of the year. And somehow my public school mentality generally creeps in every year when I'm starting out. And every year it takes me about a month to get in the groove and just enjoy the parts of my plan that are working and let go of the parts of my plan that aren't working. So it's a very fluid thing, but I have to start with some sort of plan or it's way too fluid.
Great, thanks, Amy. So one other question that just popped up is, what will your children be studying in college?
My oldest son is studying economics. My daughter, the one right there, who I had such a hard time with that first year, she is doing dietetics and pre-med. And what is so funny about that is that when we did those dissections, there's a reason she's not in the pictures. She wouldn't touch it. She would hardly even look at it. And she's scheduled for a class, a cadaver lab in the spring. So anyway, you never know, but that's where she's headed.
All right, those are all the questions and comments that I see. So we thank you, Amy, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And we invite you back next Wednesday at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern for more of our Wednesday webinars. Thank you.